Okay, so people talk a lot about Psyop and conspiracies and deterrence. Like Baudrillard talks a lot about psychological deterrence. We take down basically the reality of the world. Now, there is only really one Psyop. There is only really one deterrence. It's the great deterrence. And it is what I call the ambiguity Psyop. It's the confusion of the difference between winning and losing. And winning and losing is the simplest thing in the world. It's the desire for the nervous system to mesh with the fruits of the earth. It's natural. You can't avoid it. You can't escape that great game. That great game is you. The difference between winning and losing is the universe. It is the law of the jungle, but deeper than that. So what I want to talk about is how the ambiguity Psyop, people don't see it for two reasons. Number one, because the Psyop has worked so well, and they say, oh, the difference between winning and losing, I already know about that because I like my winning sports team to win. Of course, you're not invested in that winning or losing. And also, what they say, oh, what is winning anyway? What is losing anyway? Because life is ambiguous. So they don't see the Psyop because the Psyop has worked on them. They are brainwashed by the Psyop. They can't see it. And the more based they are, thinking that they live in a sort of Ayn Rand jungle, the more idiotic they are, really. So that's number one. The second reason that people don't see the ambiguity Psyop is because it's in everything. It's in all the different forms, and it's in forms even that appear to be completely different to each other. So, for example, you could say that Christianity is a Psyop which confuses the difference between winning and losing. I mean, Nietzsche famously talked about it as a slave aesthetic, a slave morality. So you have the transience Psyop, which comes from Christianity, which is that the meek will inherit the earth, and the king and the slave will be one in death. So there's no stake, there's no winning on this earth. Now, that transience aesthetic, that transience morality, is in postmodernism, totally, even more so. Where particularly some proto-postmodernism, Bataille, Heidegger, and then in postmodernism itself with Foucault's plague orgies, the actual stake of time as something to be grasped or hoarded or enjoyed as a hoard, actual time is lost because all time is considered to be transience by the postmoderns. The world is hollow and empty. So it's the same Psyop, except it's in different things that seem to be so different, and even at war with each other. Postmodernism appears to be at war with Christianity and all those sort of like isms, all those great heavy concepts, all those metaphysical concepts, but it is itself transcendent. It is itself a metaphysics. It's a meta phenomenon. So those are the two main reasons. Now, why is the concept of this ambiguity Psyop important? Because does it work? I mean, why use it? Why, if the Sultan has a harem and doesn't want the strong man breaking into the harem, why not just apply the usual deterrent, which is to capture, torture, castrate or something the usurper, the invader. Well, because that implies that there is a winning stake to be had. Why not apply the confusion of winning and losing? Why not make everything ambiguous and say, well, what is a pleasure palace? What is a harem? What is a woman? What is this? What is that? And so the harem disappears. It's no longer on the horizon. It's no longer a target. It's no longer a winning target. It's no longer a stake. It's no longer a juicy stake to be grasped. So the weak man in power creates this illusion that his treasures, his riches are nothing. And because everybody's riches are nothing, that's the Psyop. And so yeah, why bother? Yeah, it takes out the resolute aim. It confuses the aim of the strong man who is trying to breach the walls of the pleasure palace. You know, what is pleasure? What is woman? What is winning? What is life? What is time? What is, you know, oh, well, okay, I won't bother. So it's a deterrence on the deepest level. Now, what just as a sideline, what amazes me is that I've been quite interested in sort of Baudrillard studies and that sort of thing, and the Baudrillardians are kind of like, they're not interested in my work at all, and yet they all talk about deterrence and stuff like that. But this is the ultimate deterrence. This is the deterrence of the world. This is the deterrence on a massive scale. It's the ultimate deterrence. It's, in fact, it's the one deterrence, apart from the physical deterrence, which is too obvious to be obvious. It's if you castrate the man who's breaking into the harem, you imply the winning that is the harem. So you'll get another one coming along. You'll get the you won't solve the problem. You've merely used a big stick, and in a sense the problem is still there, because the harem is still obviously still there. The target, the difference between winning and losing, inspires ambition and lust and aggression and attack. So therefore you have to take that down. You have to cool it down. Cool everything down. Cool down the strong man. Cool down and confuse the aim of the archer, as it were. You know, sort of like make his aim falter with self-doubt, with a sense of sort of almost nausea at the embarrassment of riches that is the earth, you know. It's just a little recap of the difference between winning and losing as the world. As I've said elsewhere, the human body is programmed to mesh with the fruits of the earth. So there's no getting round the difference between winning and losing. You have to create a situation where that obvious difference is suddenly no longer obvious. So, of course, quite famously, people on the right are sort of like, oh, you know, hedonism has brought down the West. Well, yeah, maybe, but it's quite obvious that pleasure is more succulent than pleasure is more pleasurable than pain. So you have the masochism, Psyop, which I will deal with in a book at some point. And you have to create this artificial world. Now that artificial world, which I call the culture of ambiguity, is a bit of a misnomer, because the culture of ambiguity is culture. It's everywhere, and this is why I'm calling this one Psyop to rule them all. This this is the whole of culture as well as the whole of Psyop. Culture and Psyop are the same. Everything in culture is meant to confuse the difference between winning and losing. So there are 5 main categories of ambiguity Psyop. Number 1, the visceral, which is I don't really want to invade the harem because it's women are a bit icky or something. Sex is disgusting. And you've had that. That's in Christianity, and that's kind of in postmodernism, even though they pretend to revel in it. It's the same. It's the same visceral distaste. And in the Vanitas era of the late medieval, early Renaissance, that idea of the feast, the fly at the feast, gorge yourself, you're going to feel sick, the fruits of the earth are a little bit sickening. Okay, the second intellectual doubt, which is, what is the difference between this and that? What is the difference between high and low culture? What is the difference between a man and a woman, really? What is the difference between, isn't it better to lose and be humble than win and be a braggart? It's intellectual doubt. Is meant to, it's just that little moment. You don't need much to unsteady the aim of the archer, just confusion. So there's the visceral confusion, which is, and the intellectual, which is like, it's similar. So they're very different, but they are doing the same job, and they're similar in some ways. So as I say, you don't see ambiguity because it's in so many different things, and they seem to be different, and they seem to be almost at war with each other, but they're not. They're all doing the same job. Taking down the targets physically, now that means, I don't know, well, you would change, getting rid of the manly man and the womanly woman, taking down the targets. Who would want, do you really, let's say you have a capital city like London, and it's no longer quite the same. So you think, was it ever any good? You see, take that down the targets, and in a way, it's true. It's true. It was never great because it's been taken down. Because it could be taken down, so it was never that great. Existential. Now this is quite a bit deeper, but it's one of them would be transience, which is that you're going to die anyway, so what's the point? So that's the transience. As the I've written about why view all time from the end of time. People don't turn down a nice holiday because it's going to be over. People don't live. People live with time as a rich steak, and they grab as much of it as they can. But it's not intellectually. That's intellectually vulgar, and I'm probably the only person who's actually come up with that concept. Anyway, but people prefer the idea of time flies over my vulgar version of time. And there's also more subtle stuff like the spatialization of time. For example, as I say, the luxury of the sports car hides the time of the seduction brought about by owning the sports car. The grey walls of the castle hide the spatial walls of the castle. The space of the castle hides the richness of the time enjoyed within it. So the space of that is the sports car hides the time of the seduction, the time of the playboy. There's no such thing as a playboy. Isn't a guy with a sports car. The playboy is a guy who has a holiday that lasts 2 or 3 years because he can afford to. That's what it is. Time is obscured by the existential psyops, particularly transience, but there are other ones. This is the moral psyop, from the right, I put in commas. For example, self-sacrifice, heroism. Now you could say that you're going towards a higher kind of winning by sacrificing yourself for your family or your country. Well, that's fair enough. That's there's always a little bit of truth within these poisonous psyops. There's always a little bit of nutrient within the rat poison. There's always something, but heroism in its own right, heroic death is a kind of winning. Self-sacrifice as a good in itself. When you're sacrificing for something that you don't really have a stake in, that's obviously a psyop. Left morality is like guilt. We know how that's turned out for the West. Over-existing, winning too much, that sort of thing. Guilt at too much winning. All the racism stuff, that we could go on about. 7, I've got magical tricks, fractional reserve banking. The weakest man in the room can buy up the world by printing it up. That sort of thing. Political is the 8th one. Now this is working for your own replacement, that sort of thing. Now I'm going to say there are also a category which is more like the technical overarching categories, like film and art. Art enables the loser to seem like a winner by inverting the winner. For example, in Lascaux, there's the picture of the on the wall of the hunter upside down with an erection, which Bataille was very keen about. And presumably the failed hunter got a grip on the tribe by saying, look, the successful hunter is really upside down, and the beast's on top. Everything's inverted, everything's up for grabs. I will come up with a magic trick and you will all have a successful hunt. So the weakest man in the tribe, through art, which can show things that don't exist in reality, that can invert them on a two-dimensional surface, through that magic trick, through that technical trick, can subvert and deter, as it were, the strong man to take over. Film also shows things that no longer exist, so it kind of confuses the difference between winning and losing. That is time. I mean, who wins and loses? Who wins or loses? Pictures of Lily. You can adore Marilyn Monroe on a film, but she's no longer there. So is she a winning target anymore? I don't know. Onanistically, maybe. So to recap, the ambiguity psyop is the only psyop, and it does the job, which is the only job that psyop really has to do, which is to deter the strong man from going from losing to winning, to deter the natural desire of the strong man of nature to go from losing to winning, to take the citadels of pleasure, the pleasure dome, the harem, to take the treasures that the weak man in power has hold of. Now, the fact that you don't think that this ambiguity psyop exists is because it's refracted through many, many different forms, which is why you can't see it.